Hello, welcome back to the late night double feature picture show. This being the month of October, I thought I would share some horror film Halloween memories. So, my love of movies started with my dad. My dad was a huge movie fan, movies of all sorts, westerns, gangster films, classics, dramas, horror films. But my dad's taste in horror tended to run more towards the classic stuff. So when I was young, I watched King Kong, the original Godzilla, the Universal horror films, Dracula, The Mummy, The Wolfman, Frankenstein, those types of movies. So as I got to be a bit older, maybe like 11, 12, 13, I started to discover other types of horror films, not the classics. And so, we're talking the 1970s. And back in the 1970s, this is prior to us having cable TV. Yes, I'm that old. So, basically we had like 13 channels, which really wasn't 13 channels. Here in New York, it was Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 5, Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 11, Channel 13, and a couple of UHF stations that you can get into. So Channel 5, Channel 9, and Channel 11 would have these creature feature shows. They were called different things. There was Creature Feature on Channel 5. Channel 9 was Shock Theater, I think, and Channel 11 was Chiller Theater. Anyway, so on Saturdays and Sundays, these channels would show, at times, these old-time, maybe not so old-time, but these horror films. So this probably would have been somewhere in the mid-70s. So let's say 1975. I don't know where the rest of my family was. My brother was young, so he might have been in his room. My sister wasn't there in the living room, and my mom wasn't. So it's just my dad and I. And I was looking, back then it was the TV Guide. You got a paper TV Guide, and I was looking, and I saw that on Saturday evening, I believe it's 6 p.m., I think it was Channel 9, was showing this beauty. Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. So, being 11, 12, however old I was, the title intrigued me, and I basically kind of begged Dad for us to watch it. And my father seemed a little dubious. The title seemed to put him off a little bit, but he agreed. So I believe it was in the fall, because it was 6 p.m. and it was dark early. And so we sat down and we started to watch this horror movie. So just a little bit of plot. The idea of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things is that a company of actors and their director, I believe that they put on plays, and this is all taking place in South Florida. When the movie opens, they are on a sailboat heading off of mainland Florida to an island. And when they arrive on the island, you discover that that island has this old-time cemetery there. And that the director of this troupe of actors has brought them there to basically perform some black magic, demonic rituals that supposedly will bring the dead back to life, and that the dead, when they rise, will serve them, because through this ritual, Satan would have given the power over these dead bodies to these actors and the director. So they go and they go to there's an abandoned caretaker's home on the island, and the story is that two of the caretakers committed suicide there. So all kinds of bad news on this island. Eventually, around midnight, they go to the cemetery and they dig up a corpse. And once they've dug the corpse up, drag it out of the hole in the ground, kind of prop it up on this cross, they go through the rites. I forgot to mention. So when they first open the coffin, there's this kind of horribly decayed corpse in there. And the director, whose name is Alan, tells one of the actors to get down there and pull the corpse out. And ultimately, when the guy gets down into the grave to go pull the corpse up, the corpse sits up and attacks him. And of course, bedlam ensues. People are running in all directions and screaming. The guy in the coffin is struggling with the corpse, reanimated corpse that's attacking him. Another corpse-like figure comes rushing out of the woods and grabs one of the female actresses. Once this bedlam is unleashed, you start to realize you're hearing this laughter, and the laughter is coming from the director, Alan. And it just turns out that this was all an elaborate hoax, that the person who was put into the grave was wearing prosthetic makeup. The person who was other zombie creature was running around on the island was also. So these are two other actors in their film troupe, one who had been buried. And evidently you can last underground without oxygen for some time. It sounded a bit wrong to me, but anyway, for the sake of the movie. So ultimately, it's a joke, right? And all the actors are kind of like, okay, good one, blah, blah, blah. So they think that's the end of it. But no, Alan still wants to perform his satanic ritual. So ultimately, they drag the real corpse that had been taken out of the coffin and replaced with the actor. They drag him off from the side. And by the way, the caretaker is also on the island. He's been tied up off to the side. So ultimately, they perform this satanic ritual. Involves a book with a spell. It involves the dried blood of unborn children. Not quite sure how you get dried blood from unborn children. Being sprinkled on all the graves, and ultimately Alan performs the ritual and nothing occurs. So there's a general mocking of Alan by the troupe, because the troupe doesn't really like Alan all that much, the director, and they go back to the caretaker's home. They leave the two people who were playing the zombies behind to fill in the grave that had been dug up, and they decide to take the corpse that had been taken out of the grave back to the caretaker's house, because Alan is just kind of like that kind of guy, right? Ultimately, the dead do rise. They attack the caretaker home. They're trapped in that home, and basically one by one, the zombies kind of get to these people and kind of eat them alive, right? The interesting thing about this film is that it was clearly influenced by Night of the Living Dead, which had come out like 5 or 6 years prior to the production of this film. One other thing I'd like to point out is that this film was directed by Bob Clark of A Christmas Story fame. So when you turn on TBS and they're showing 24 Hours of A Christmas Story, that director directed this movie, oddly under the name Benjamin Clark for some reason. So this film was clearly influenced by Night of the Living Dead. And the thing that's interesting about it is that this group of folks who go out to the island, again, this film came out in 1972, had a very hippie kind of flavor to them. The clothing they wore, their attitudes, the way they spoke, very early 70s hippie. The dialogue in a lot of places was like really kind of like cheesy, out there, goofy. And some of the acting, especially by the director of the group, who is played by, so the character's name is Alan. The character is played by Alan Ormsby. Alan Ormsby, who went on to have a lot of fame. He actually acted, he did special makeup effects. He wrote screenplays. He actually wrote the screenplay for Paul Schrader's version of The Cat People, and he wrote several other screenplays. So Alan Ormsby himself had a very interesting career. Alan Ormsby playing this this director is a really unlikable character, and his performance in the role is something that you really kind of have to see. So all of these elements, you know, the 70s, the hippie look, the dialogue, things that were going on the screen, my poor dad was, you know, looking at the screen the entire time with this look of bafflement. You know, whereas I, at 11 or 12 years old, was eating it up. My dad was staring at the screen with complete and utter, like, what is going on in this movie? Again, you know, my dad having grown up in the golden age of horror films, and this was a very modern, for its time, horror film. So, but, you know, give him credit. He persevered. He rewatched the entire film. It has gone on to become one of my all-time favorite of those types of horror movies. I still watch it all the time. As a matter of fact, I've reached out to Alan Ormsby to see if I could actually get him on the channel to do an interview. He hasn't responded. He may very well say no, and I would completely understand that. You know, who am I? And this is a little tiny channel. But anyway, I would love to be able to get him on and talk about his career, both in this film and his other works. So anyway, yeah, big, excuse me, thank you to Dad. Dad's no longer with us. He passed several years ago. But a big thank you to Dad for allowing me to watch this film in the mid-70s. Obviously a film that he really wasn't interested in seeing, but knew that it was important to me that I wanted to see it, and sat through the entire thing and watched it with me. So there you have it, a brief October horror film Halloween memory that incorporated my dad and a memory of my dad. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. I'm trying to grow the channel. So if this is the type of content that you enjoy, please give it a subscribe, and also maybe recommend it to friends of yours who might have similar interests. So thanks again for joining me at the Late Night Double Feature Picture Show, and I'll see you again soon.